Welcome to Shenanigans Ensue with
Mary SanGiovanni!
And Cosmic Shenanigans with Mary SanGiovanni is brought to you this week by Serial Box, the HBO for readers. Learn about their brand new series, Silverwood, The Door, written by showrunner Brian Keene with Richard Chismar, Stephen Kazanowski, and the Sisters of Slaughter, debuting this October. You can learn more at serialbox.com/Silverwood. That's Serialbox, SERIAL box.com/Silverwood.
Woohoo! Hi folks, welcome to lucky episode number 13 of Cosmic Shenanigans. I'm Mary SanGiovanni, up to shenanigans once again of cosmic proportions. Today, we're going to talk about Robert E. Howard's The Black Stone, which was first published, as so many cosmic horror stories were, in Weird Tales in November of 1931. I'm lucky enough to have read the story in Keene's issue of the Skullface Omnibus, where the short story, Robert E. Howard short stories appeared, collected. Now, the Black Stone...
That's the Neville Spearman first edition of Skullface Omnibus for the book geeks out there. Hi, this is engineer Brian Keene and Mary's shoulder.
Oh my!
Did you also warn them that we're recording this in the yard and they may hear birds? And
you may hear nature. Yes, you may hear nature.
I'm sorry. Back to your show.
Thank you. But it's a nice breeze, so I'm all for it. Now, The Black Stone is considered not just a story compatible with Lovecraft's mythos, but an actual part of the mythos cycle. Lovecraft and Howard were contemporaries and friends, and Howard was a member of Lovecraft's circle. Now, while a look at Robert E. Howard's life would be fascinating, a half hour wouldn't do it justice. Although known primarily for his Conan the Barbarian and Kull the Conqueror stories, which, if I may make a guess here, I would say it's science fantasy and grimdark probably at its best. He wrote in several different genres, not the least of which was horror. And as I said, he's an interesting man with an interesting life, but what we're really going to focus on today is just The Black Stone and its contribution to the cosmic horror canon. Now, one of the great fictitious books in any cosmic horror enthusiast's occult library, alongside the Necronomicon and the Cult de Ghoul, is, and I apologize if I'm massacring the German, the Unsprechlichen Kulten, or Nameless Cults, also known as the Black Book, by Friedrich von Junz, allegedly written in 1839 in Dusseldorf. This tome first appeared in Howard's The Children of the Night, and again in The Black Stone, both of which came out, as I mentioned, in 1931. From the wiki on this particular book, Unaussprechliche Kulte would be the German for unspeakable cults. The form Unaussprechlichen Kulten is the dative case, suggesting a full title of Von Unaussprechlichen Kulten, of unspeakable cults, as it were, De Cultus Ineffabilibus, or similar. Basically, what we're saying is that the German adjective may not only translate to unspeakable, unutterable, or ineffable, but also to unpronounceable or tongue-twisting. So it's a good title for a book that is said to capture many of Lovecraft's difficult names of gods and places and monsters and whatnot, and of the cults, of course, that worship them. Naturally, this book discusses cults and their origins at length, which is a tentpole of cosmic horror tales. We've discussed that. Many cosmic horror tales involve some type of cult or group of people trying to bring about some ancient horror. However, the narrator is more interested in one particular obscure mention of a monolith in this book, which is known as the Black Stone. And there's even a nod, although I don't know if it's intentional, but I wouldn't be surprised if it were, to Lovecraft's dream cycle. If you look at this quote where he's describing another book in which he's finding more information about the Black Stone, he says, "I did find subject for thought in Dornley's Magyar folklore. In his chapter on dream myths, he mentions the Black Stone and tells of some curious superstitions regarding it, especially the belief that if anyone sleeps in the vicinity of the monolith, that person will be haunted by monstrous nightmares forever after." So there is a connection to the idea that dreams and nightmares play a significant role in the power that this Black Stone has. And as we know, Lovecraft put a lot of stock into the awesome inspirational power of dreams and nightmares in terms of creating horror. Further on, after discovering the monolith itself and examining the top 5 or 6 feet of spiraling hieroglyphs, the narrator discovers that they, like the semi-transparent dull black stone itself, are unlike anything he has ever seen, aside from a passing resemblance to scratchings on a rock in the Yucatan. So this monolith, this Black Stone, is about 16 feet tall, and I believe he said about 1.5 feet thick. So it's really more of a spire than a particular statue or obelisk as we would come to know it, or monolith as we would know it. But one of the significant aspects of the description was that, quote, "It was as if the monolith had been reared by alien hands in an age distant and apart from human ken," end quote. See, so we have this suggestion that, again, there are things older than mankind and wider than the known universe going on here. Another interesting aspect of the story is that we also have mention of the closest town to the monolith, the Stogoykavar, or roughly translated witch town, located in Hungary. In keeping with Lovecraft's evident fascination with shadow-haunted Salem and its possible witch descendants, the name of the town is a nice touch. We come to find it's more of a nickname, though. Evidently, the original name of the town was Xuthltan, which is, again, in keeping with words that are impossible to pronounce. That would be Xuthltan. It does not, like so many towns in the Arkham, Massachusetts region, appear on any maps, but the narrator discovers it is situated in wild country, outside the normal tourist routes. In speaking with a tavern owner in Stogoykavar, we get a glimpse of the witch town's history, along with a nod to Lovecraft's racism and his distaste and distrust of outside people, as well as a possible reason for the animosity between the current residents and the ancient settlers who were accused of kidnapping women and children from the lowlands. Quote, "Mine host did not speak of the extermination of the original inhabitants with any great resentment, and I learned that his ancestors in the lower levels have looked on the mountaineers with even more hatred and aversion than they regarded the Turks. He was rather vague regarding the causes of this feud, but said that the original inhabitants of Stogoykavar had been in the habit of making stealthy raids on the lowlands and stealing girls and children. Moreover, he said that they were not exactly of the same blood as his own people. The sturdy, original Magyar Slavic stock had mixed and intermarried with a degraded aboriginal race until the breeds had blended, producing an unsavory amalgamation. Who these aborigines were, he had not the slightest idea, but maintained that they were pagans and had dwelt in the mountains since time immemorial before the coming of the conquering peoples," end quote. So we have a little bit of that degenerate stock happening here. And again, a particular reference to pagans as, I believe he puts it, a potential rising threat to the European way of life. We also have Cyclopean cliffs. How could we not? Now, one of the interesting things that I like about Robert E. Howard's writing, particularly in this short story, is a description of the area where this monolith is, particularly on Midsummer's Night, where things are said to happen. It offers this sort of subtle suggestion of personification for the landscape. Now, the reason I picked this up is I noticed that I tend to do that too. I try to work the setting in as a kind of character capable of generating much of the atmosphere. And I no doubt picked it up from writers like Howard and Lovecraft and others in that circle who tend to do that. I think they recognize that surroundings, particularly in horror, are often the truly crucial elements in establishing a sense of dread or terror. Horror essentially has people revert back to a certain aspect of our primal nature, where instinct and awareness of our surroundings is important. And so I think that in a genre that is so closely aligned with tapping into emotions and into that primal instinct of self-preservation, the setting is an important part of a horror story. Now, speaking of description, all right, Howard goes where Lovecraft doesn't seem to dare. He describes nudity, aspects of the particular ritual that happens on Midsummer's Night, and violence in a way that Lovecraft only ever hints at. There's flagellation, there are bloody trails, there's a graphic depiction of an infant sacrifice, and an orgy of violence and madness. If you ever wondered about that which could not be described in Lovecraft stuff, it's pretty much described in this story in detail. So is the ancient evil toad god that the cultists summon to the top of the monolith. So it was kind of fascinating, really, to read this story and to see how all those things that Lovecraft says, like, these unspeakable things happened in the dark of night on hilltops on Midsummer's Eve and the equinoxes. And Robert E. Howard tells you in detail what happens. And I think that, if you're delving into cosmic horror, this may actually be a good story to start with, because it has all the elements of a Lovecraft story without the vagueness that I think sometimes turns people off about Lovecraft. Because Howard more or less states what traditional cosmic horror usually only hints at, that our past is full of terrible and unspeakably evil things, these vast things which once ruled the earth with unfathomable and limitless alien power, things which the natural world has done its best to swallow up over eons of time. So a lot of this stuff is buried because the earth tried to reclaim its own space. Now that, while horrific in itself, is not really the true source of horror. Rather, it is that if these things once roamed the earth as part of our past, then they might very well be some outlying part of our present or future. And it might only be a matter of time, naive curiosity, or sinister determination that allows the keys to outer doors to be opened and the old monstrosities to come pouring in. So I think I think that this story is a good contribution to cosmic horror, particularly if you're looking to delve in for the first time for something to get a handle on what cosmic horror sort of stands for. This man, in true Howard fashion, he's not a fainting wallflower type. We don't even get the impression that he's socially awkward the way a lot of Lovecraftian characters are. A lot of narrators seem to be. He's kind of a man's man, and he's not particularly afraid of anything. He's certainly not afraid of stories, and he's also not. I would say, given the nature of the story, one of the few who is not driven to madness by what he does witness in detail on top of this mountain. But he does acknowledge that it opens up the possibility to something even more horrible, which is the idea that if one of those things is even proven partially true in this unersprechlichen Kulten, then maybe more of it is true. And there's a certain, again, even though it was written around the same time that Lovecraft stories were written, there's just a slight evolution. There's a slight evolution in perception and in the kind of characters dealing with this cosmic horror, it turns out to be a very versatile kind of story that is, easily adaptable to science fantasy, to dark fantasy, weird fiction, and to the characters that you would generally see in any of those types of tales. That essentially they're all looking at the same thing, that there is a vast, indifferent, and powerful group of entities that came before, and that this same power may come again, or it may be here right now. So there's never really been a point, nor is there never really a place on this earth where we've just been safe, where we really have been the rulers, the supreme entities of our own planet. And although that nihilistic idea is not necessarily in the forefront, it's not necessarily pervasive, it is present in a lot of stories. What I find interesting, again, with a lot of cosmic horror, and even with some of Lovecraft's, but mostly with the stuff that came after, is this idea that it may be that we are not the top of the food chain in this particular planet, but it doesn't mean that our lives are without meaning. And that's one of the things that attracts me to this. I think Lovecraft tried to set up the horrific oh my god moment as being our lives are worthless, they're meaningless, because in the face of these things, we're insignificant. What I like about the evolutions of cosmic horror is the idea that that's not true, or we're fighting against that. We're fighting for some sense of supremacy, but more importantly, we're fighting with some sense of significance. So I leave you with one final quote from the fictitious poet of this, in this story. He said, "They say foul things of old times still lurk in dark forgotten corners of the world, and gates still gape to loose on certain nights, shapes pent in hell." That's Justin Jeffrey.
And one more time, this episode of Cosmic Shenanigans is brought to you by Serial Box, the HBO for readers. Start listening or reading today at serialbox.com. That's SERIAL box.com.
And I'd like to especially thank Dave and Brian, because one or the other of them is always engineering and making noise in the background, but always engineering something for me in Cosmic Shenanigans. That was a cosmic horror thump back there. Dave.
Here's a cosmic opening of the refrigerator door. The cosmic
opening of the deep depths of the Antarctic in our fridge. Dave is on Twitch, and he has at Meteor Notes channel. I believe it's twitch.tv/Meteor Notes. Thanks, Brian. And Brian has two podcasts on which you can hear the sweet, sweet sounds of his voice.
They can hear me right here in the background.
They can hear you in the background here. They can hear you on The Horror Show with Brian Keene, where Brian, Dave, and I discuss all kinds of things.
Also me.
And Dungeon Master. That's true. That's true. We have a quick shout out to Dungeon Master in the background, who's been awesome. He's been playing Fallout and kicking butt. Brian Keene also does Defenders Dialogue. If you're into comic book stuff, it's adorable to listen to him and Chris Gold talk about the Defenders. And that's about it. If you want to advertise on Cosmic Shenanigans, send an email to Armand Rosamilia at armandrosamilia@gmail.com. You can check out past, present, and future episodes of Cosmic Shenanigans for free on Project Entertainment Network. Stitcher, we're hoping, Stitcher and Spotify, I think they're working on getting me up on that. Google Play, iTunes, and all other platforms where you can hear podcasts. Next week, I believe it's a toss-up between A. Merritt and Ambrose Bierce. I think I'm leaning toward Ambrose Bierce, the damn thing, but tune in anyway and you'll be surprised. We'll talk about another cosmic horror story and its awesome connections to the great body of literature that we're working on today. So I will see you next week. Thanks. Bye.
How do people who make stuff up for a living make stuff up?
New York Times bestseller Jonathan Mayberry told us.
Oprah's book club favorite Sue Miller told us.
You sort of take a character and make some bad things happen.
How'd we get them to do that?
We collared them, just like at a cocktail party, except through your headphones.
Join us every Thursday for the Liars Club Oddcast.
A slightly unhinged podcast where storytellers interview other storytellers.
Available on Project Entertainment Network, iTunes, and everywhere podcasts are heard.